everybody for coming to our penultimate ABLE Annual Meeting 2021 session. And today's session is all in the name of the students. And I'm really excited to have a number of students here today with whom we can talk and have a panel conversation, ask them some questions about their experiences in regards to using e-portfolios, and also get connected to the topic of our conference here that is around learner identity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So what we'll do now is introduce our students briefly and hear from them why they have been creating portfolios. And since it's always been pretty hard to find an order of how to introduce four incredible people, I thought I'll go with an easy one and start with in alphabetical order with the first names. Just wanted to make it clear to you what order I had selected so that there is not any questions why this person and not another one. But it also turns out that we are starting in the future, because Priyana is our first student whom I'd like to introduce to you. Priyana Idewals is a Bachelor in Media Communication at Monash University in Australia, and she was one of the students I had the opportunity to interview as well for our student activities here at the ABLE conference, and you're very welcome to look at or to listen to her interview later on. And Priyana's created a number of portfolios. And so I'd like to hand over to her now to tell us a little bit about her work.
Hi, everyone. So I am a member of the Bachelor of Media Communications. So as part of that course, we have used e-portfolios. And my e-portfolios originally were just a way to submit my assessments. So I would put reflections on there, I'd put graphics, video essays, podcasts. But as I specialize in journalism, I've also created e-portfolios to showcase some of the articles I've written, some of the podcasts that I'm most proud of. So that's what I use my e-portfolios for.
Thank you, Priyana. And now going into the geographical east direction, we are landing on the west coast of the United States, where we are going to meet Mandy Misuta. She's a PhD candidate in education and is doing her thesis on silos in education. And you can read all about that in her PhD portfolio, as well as listen to her in her student interview that we have done. And she also participated in this year's doctoral student portfolio session just the other day here at the conference. And so I'll hand over to Mandy to talk a little bit about her portfolio.
Hi, thank you for that. So my name is Mandy Misuta. I am a doctoral student, and the way that I used my portfolio, it was a way to bridge a little bit of my traditional dissertation work. So as a doctoral student, in the United States, I am completing the usual requirements for the conference of my doctoral credential. Instead of completing a 5-chapter monograph, however, I am completing a multi-paper dissertation format, meaning that I am completing 3 articles that do have a theme interwoven between the 3 articles, unified together with an introduction and conclusion. The way that I've used my e-portfolio is as a way to create a little bit of translation and a little bit of a bridge between the academic and my professional realm. As a doctoral student, I hold a lot of hats. I also work full-time professionally, and you have an established career working in both project management and in consulting. And so I joke that being a full-time doctoral student is my side gig and my hobby. And so I found the e-portfolio to be an opportunity to showcase my doctoral work and to have it be a bridge to really illuminate the work that I was doing at work and to really highlight just that. And it's really proven to be an effective bridge to illuminate and kind of be a bridge from the theoretical to the practical side of things. And so that was really the lens with which I utilized my ePortfolio. And it's been a really effective way to have a visual and artistic representation of the way that my 3-paper dissertation kind of weaves together. And it really has provided a unique and creative way to tell the narrative, not only of my dissertation work, but really the narrative of who I am as an academic and a professional as well. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you very much, Mindy. Now let's head over to the eastern part of the United States, where Naomi Pitts lives. She is a bachelor student in biosystems engineering at Auburn University in Alabama, and has also a very unique lens into her portfolio work. Naomi, please go ahead.
Thank you for that, Christina. So my name is Naomi. I'm an undergraduate studying biosystems engineering. And when I first started my portfolio, it was just an assignment for a class. It was a way for us to reflect on the previous courses that we've taken and what we've gotten from them, as well as some of our experience. But beyond just doing the assignment for class, I found that it was a great way for me to express what type of work I would like to do and what I'm capable of as a biosystems engineer, because hearing that you might not know exactly what that sort of engineer does, but my portfolio allows me to showcase everything that I learned in my classes and the type of work that I like to do as a biosystems engineer.
Thank you, Naomi. And we are concluding our tour around the world in Ireland. We started out at 9 o'clock in the morning with Brianna in Australia, and we've traveled across the world and finishing up at midnight with Samantha, who was a master's student, level 9 early years education at Dublin City University. Samantha, do you want to tell us a little bit about your portfolio, please?
Certainly, thanks, Christina. I initially set up my ePortfolio because I felt that I really wanted to showcase my commitment towards building relationships, particularly during COVID. It was an interesting experience because I was studying my level 9 in mentoring at the time. And I was also delivering a personal and professional practice module for DCU as well. And as part of that, the students needed to develop their own e-portfolios. So I really felt that I needed to have a better understanding of the e-portfolio myself in order to be able to assist and help students. So I shared my own e-portfolio with students just to reach out with them and just to show them that things don't need to be perfect to be meaningful. This particular page that I've chosen to share was just in relation to the work that I did during COVID-19. I have been an owner manager of preschool for the last 12 years. And when COVID hit, I was very concerned that I needed to build, maintain and sustain relationships with the parents and children that were coming to my setting. So I set up a YouTube channel called Supershed Stories. And it was a storytelling initiative. I had 16 children in the preschool at the time, but it kind of grew legs and we ended up taking story requests from children all over the country. And I was delighted to narrate the stories. I am not a broadcaster and I'm not a narrator either. But it was a meaningful initiative in that the children sent in their story requests. There was huge parental involvement behind it. It built a great network and a great community of practice and sustained relationships. And in addition to that, we were also able to raise some much needed funds for Crumlin Children's Hospital from the storytelling as well. So it was really nice to be able to give something back to all the frontline workers during that time.
Thank you very much, Samantha. And yeah, as you can hear, we have lots of different stories, lots of study programs, and lots of different cultural backgrounds also here united in our session. And so let's hear more from all of our students. And for that, I'll hand over to my co-facilitator for the session today, Kevin Kelly.
Kevin, you're on mute. While we ask the prepared questions that all the students have had a chance to digest, we also hope that you all in the audience will share your questions for our students in the chat, and we'll keep an eye on that and insert them when appropriate. But to kick us off, our first question, and I believe all four of you are ready to answer this one. Did you discuss the topic of belonging and inclusion with your instructor, educator, or fellow students during the portfolio creation process? And if so, how did you benefit from that conversation? If not, do you think you could have benefited from such a discussion? So shall we start again with the alphabetical order since we've gone through the whole group? Brianna, how would you answer that? Did you discuss the topic of belonging and inclusion as part of the ePortfolio process?
Yeah, so most definitely studying media communications, belonging and inclusion is a massive part of our study program. So we're always talking about in media, who gets to communicate their stories. So when we were using our ePortfolios, a lot of the times it was about storytelling. It was about reflections, about documentaries that discussed media challenges, or reflecting on our own experiences, or maybe interviewing someone else. So we definitely did try to include voices from different groups, from different people, from different walks of life. I would say in my work, I always tried to interview people if I could get a source who had more experience, because obviously I'm not going to have experience in all these different sort of media challenges. I would try to talk to them. So that's how I tried to apply it. Or otherwise just doing your sort of standard referencing. And a big thing with ePortfolios is you can just write a reflection, but you can also then put in videos, you can put in documentaries, you can link to these things or show them up on your page. So that actually supports the work you did. So for instance, during last year, I wrote a reflection on discrimination on facial recognition. And my sort of ethnic group doesn't face the same issues as a lot of African Americans who get falsely racially profiled due to these facial recognition. So it wasn't enough for me to just say things. I then had to bring in a different voice, and using ePortfolios, I could easily link to that, because it's not enough to just share my story, but I have to let other people who actually experience that communicate their voice.
Oh, wonderful. Mandy, same question to you.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, my dog is going a little crazy. So I would say that absolutely yes. It was definitely something that was discussed with my advisor. So my advisor is Dr. Candace Reynolds, and she's actually on the phone right now. So we kind of talked about the topic of inclusion. We framed it as how the ePortfolio process is kind of, we're pushing the boundaries a little bit about how utilizing ePortfolios for a doctoral student. It's something that is not widely recognized within our institution. It's something that we're pushing for wider acceptance for, and definitely norming within the academy. And so as we had these discussions about utilizing ePortfolios within the context of inclusion, we talked about how potentially using an ePortfolio for my dissertation work would be an exercise in kind of showing how breaking the mold of the traditional 5-chapter monograph dissertation or the traditional dissertation process within the higher education in the United States by using an ePortfolio is actually an exercise in rethinking how we can make the doctoral process more inclusive for more people, particularly people who may have historically been pushed out of the academy. And so that was something, as you know, in the interview that I had with Christina, we kind of talked a little bit about equity and inclusion, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more in the panel today. As we talked about, you know, the opportunity to use the ePortfolio as an opportunity and an exercise in inclusivity, it was something that really, it really impassioned me and gave me a new motivation for utilizing ePortfolio for a method to which to integrate it within my dissertation process.
Thank you. Naomi, did you discuss the topic of belonging and inclusion with your fellow students or the instructor during the portfolio creation process?
So diversity wasn't really discussed upon the creation of my portfolio, since it's really something that's more personal. It's just my own experiences. But as I was making it, I definitely thought about diversity and inclusion because I am a Black woman in engineering, and I am a minority since this is a largely male and Caucasian field. So I did have to think about what parts of myself I will be revealing with my portfolio. Something I spoke about, Christina, even having my picture on there. People might have biases towards me because I am Black or I am a woman doing engineering. But I had to realize that by me putting myself out there on my portfolio and sharing my small window of diversity and the experiences that I have, I'm not only showing myself to the world, but I'm seeing how they react to me. So if someone's looking at my portfolio and they don't like something that I put on there, then that's telling me what I should think about them as well, because I am not ashamed or embarrassed of anything after my portfolio, not the organizations that I volunteer with or who I am as a person. I'm not going to hide that or dim that down. So as far as diversity, I know that me putting my portfolio out there is adding to the diversity in the engineering world. So while it wasn't discussed upon creating it, it's definitely a topic that I think about when adding to my portfolio.
Thank you so much. And Samantha, same question to you.
I think when I'm talking about ePortfolio development, I'm speaking from the lens of an early years professional, and the curriculum that we use here in Ireland, it's ASHTR, it's the Irish word for journey, and one of the 4 themes of ASHTR is identity and belonging. So that thread, I suppose, would be a core value for anybody who's working in early years in Ireland. So it's probably a natural affinity as such. I feel that ePortfolio development in terms of that is a fantastic opportunity to share your core values and your personal identity. And you're right, Naomi, what you said, it does leave a vulnerability there. But do you know what? I feel that, you know, it shows that you're human as well, and that you're on a learning journey too. And I suppose that was the perspective in me sharing my ePortfolio as well, in that things, you know, if they're meaningful to you, well, then they should be in your ePortfolio. So as regards identity and belonging, I think it can be a catalyst for well-being, the portfolio development, because you can look back at your achievements on your ePortfolio, and that can give you confidence to move forward and try new things and step outside your comfort zone along the way as well.
Great. Christina, would you like to field the next question?
Sure. I think we've already started, or our students started already answering that a little bit, because you've brought in your own cultural background. And so we just wanted to know, when you created your portfolio, did you feel you could safely be yourself and bring in your own experiences, personal and cultural backgrounds? Naomi, do you maybe want to expound a bit more on that, because you are getting really, really personal in your portfolio?
Yes, I am very open and honest about my life and my portfolio. I'll start with my About page. You can read my upbringing to where I am now in college. And aside from my race and gender identity being a major part of my portfolio that's being put out there, I also talk about my experience having cancer. So I am a 2-time cancer survivor. I had cancer when I was 12 years old, and again during my junior year or my sophomore year of college. And I had to take a break from school to do my treatments. And when I came back, I was very nervous about telling this to employers or teachers. I didn't want them to think that I was a liability or that I could get sick again or think anything less of me because I had cancer. And I was very afraid coming back into the workforce and into school, how this would impact me. But over time, I realized that people don't look at me having a sickness or having had a sickness and overcome it as a weakness. So it's something that I want to share of because I'm proud of it now. I'm proud that I was able to go through that and get better. And now I'm back in school. And I think that being able to look at what I've accomplished as a student, as far as my grades, the classes I'm taking, the experience that I have, plus I've survived cancer, that just makes me feel like an even stronger person, not a weaker person, which is what I might have thought before I did my ePortfolio.
And Naomi, I think that is a wonderful story to share, and also to give other students the encouragement to think about whether they want to be doing something similar, or then also get feedback from others and then make the decision how much they want to share of each other. Mandy, I'd like to hand over to you for that question. Do you feel like you could safely express yourself in your portfolio work?
You know, I did. And I was really struck by the use of the word vulnerability earlier. And I think that one of the things that the ePortfolio allowed me to do is to have that platform to be vulnerable. And within my portfolio, I have kind of on my homepage a statement of positionality that explains kind of how my life has intertwined within the journey of my dissertation topic. And I use some of the imagery from my life story to intertwine it with some of the imagery found within my dissertation, and how similarly, you know, my dissertation topic is on the subject of organizational silos, and how several of the remarkable kind of pivotal moments of my life stories have also been demarcated with silos. And I think, you know, and anytime we engage in research, it's important to acknowledge our positionality. And so I appreciated that the ePortfolio allowed me a place to do so in a more creative way, and in a more vulnerable way. I would be remiss to say, to not mention that I will say that there is a bit of hesitancy of putting yourself out there within an academic environment. You know, especially with me, that I'm using this both academically and professionally as well. And so I did find myself making sure that as I put my positionality out there, you know, I found myself kind of second guessing. But at the end of the day, I really resonated, you know, with what Naomi said of just, you know, how much we have to benefit by the act of being vulnerable. And I think that the ePortfolio really pushed me to err on that side of being vulnerable, to have a platform to say, you know, let's make our learning more transformative. You know, let's take the academy and make, you know, let's push the boundaries of what it means to create transformative research and engagement, and include a little bit more of ourselves. And the ePortfolio really allowed that for me. And so I was really appreciative for the opportunity to put a little bit more of my personal nature into my work.
Thank you, Mandy. And Brianna, you're up next. And you already mentioned that as part of your study program, you do talk about inclusion, diversity, equity, equal representation. So how did that then influence you, how you created your portfolio? Did that make you feel safer to express yourself, or where are you coming from?
Yeah, so with that sort of idea in mind, we were always told to relate the issues and the topics we discussed and then place ourselves and put ourselves in position with them. For instance, I wrote many reflections about beauty standards in East Asia, and I'm half Asian myself. So then I would relate how those, I suppose, representations and how those standards had affected me. But then since it is my portfolio and since this is the work that I'm choosing to put out into the public, it's obviously very personal to me. And these reflections all have an element of myself in them. I try to put everything that I do, I try to be a bit passionate about it. So the stories I write, the articles I write, the people I interview, these are topics that I'm passionate about and that I want to share. So for instance, I write a lot about sustainability and about protecting the wildlife in Australia, which is really important. These are things I'm passionate about, and these are things that I want to get out into the public, and things that hopefully one day in my professional life I can write more about. So yeah, I felt very comfortable being able to share what I was passionate about, my culture, my background into the ePortfolio. And I think, as many of our panelists have already mentioned, it is something that's important, being able to be vulnerable, being able to be open on our portfolios, because that's what represents us. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Brianna. And now over to Sam. I think amongst our panel, you also hold a unique position because you are a student as well as a lecturer, as well as a professional who has been working with children for many, many years. So how's your own experience as student feeling safe to express your many different experiences in your portfolio? And maybe also if you could, if you have any experience of how you do that yourself for your own students that you teach at DCU.
Yeah, I think during developing my own portfolio, it really gave me an insight into how students feel when they're developing their own. And something that I noticed about myself was that there was kind of this internal critic going on. And that sometimes, you know, you would think about typing something in and then you were like, no, I'll take that out. And then you take 2 lines out and put 1 in and swap it backwards and forwards. And I think what happened along the journey of the ePortfolio development was that I ended up making friends with this critic. So turning, I think, this inner critic into a best friend is the best thing that you can do, because you need to be your own best friend on the process. Otherwise, it'll run into a scenario, and I have helped students along this road. Done is better than perfect. And certainly when it's an assignment that needs to be done, it needs to be done. But there is this sense of perfection, I suppose, when you are a professional and you have these big core values that you want to showcase and you want to get that message across. But I do feel that ePortfolio, it is just such a beautiful tool to be able to show your personality and to get your passion across, because it separates. I feel that, you know, you could have all these qualifications and that's wonderful and that's fantastic, but where is it evident in practice? And I think that's the difference with ePortfolio. You can actually validate your experience in practice in your ePortfolio through your evidence of evidencing your core values in your practice, if you know what I mean. And I saw that when I would go out to visit students that were on placement before COVID kicked in. Obviously, we had to go to remote learning, but before COVID kicked in, and it was really, really wonderful to see students' confidence grow. And I even felt my own confidence growing during the process, because the ePortfolio just gives you time and space digitally to revisit your learning. And I think that, you know, as an early years professional, I'm always have the mantra that, you know, there's great value in repetition for young children and revisiting learning. But I feel as adults as well, often we achieve these huge milestones in our life, but we never get the time or space to actually evaluate our learning and, more importantly, reflect on it, reflect on our learning journey along the way as well.
So true, Sam. And in some cases, we don't even take the time to celebrate them because we make ourselves so busy. I know when I was in Mandy's position and finished my doctorate, I was working full time and teaching on the side. And so I didn't take the time to celebrate other than a small dinner. We got a great question. We have several great questions from the audience, and we will weave them all in and kind of the flow that we've organized for the questions. And I think the one that Ingrid asked is a good follow-on to what we just answered. And so it will be just those who feel comfortable answering this one on the spot. What were or are the triggers that enabled you to change your thinking from e-portfolios are only for assessment for my unit or program or department to something that now you're using to identify you outside and beyond your studies? If there are any triggers, what would you attribute to that change in mental attitude? And I'll just open the floor to whoever would like to answer.
I could answer that one.
Please.
So as I mentioned, my portfolio started as a class assignment for my biosystems. I think it was like intro to biosystems class. And I really just did it as just an assignment. I'm not sure at what point I became more passionate about it, but I know somewhere along the way, I realized that this was a valuable tool because as I've said before, biosystems engineering, people hear that and they don't know exactly what it is. And just to give you a brief explanation, it's pretty much a discipline of engineering at the intersection of engineering and agriculture. So I'm really interested in sustainability, environmental science, and things of that nature. But when I'm going to career fairs and meeting employers and graduate school professors, because I do want to go to graduate school, it can be hard to explain that to them. And then I end up spending so much time explaining what my major is that I don't have time to discuss the research I could do with them or the work I could do with their company. So by having my e-portfolio, this is a perfect place to kind of tie in my professional, academic, and personal life because you can look on there and see what classes I've taken, you can see what work experience I've had, and you can see what I personally am interested in as a person, like what type of work I want to do as far as sustainability and site design, and also the skills that I have that can apply to this. So I've taken this portfolio that was just for a class, and now I use it as a tool when I'm networking to help people realize who I am and what I'm capable of as an engineer.
Amazing. Does anybody else have a story or a trigger?
I would say that my experience was really similar to Naomi's. Originally, yes, I just used my e-portfolio for assessments, but with journalism and the industry I'm trying to break into, it is so important to have a portfolio to showcase your work because that's what they're looking at. They're trying to look at what sort of stories you're producing, what sort of interviews can you get, what are you passionate in, what experience you have. So I think as soon as I started, well, I entered the ending of my first year and I started to accumulate a sort of collection of stories, I started realizing how important it was to actually display these to the public and to potential employers in the future.
Yeah, and I can piggyback a little bit. So as a doctoral student, I mentioned earlier, this actually wasn't necessarily a requirement for assessment, but whenever it was proposed to me as a way to kind of, break the mold and maybe push for some change, that was something that definitely intrigued me as someone who is very interested in maybe shaking up paradigms and being a little bit of someone who likes to push for change in systems. So that was definitely something that pushed me. And then I would say that my another trigger for me was also very similar to our other two panelists who've already answered, is that I am a very interdisciplinary person, both academically in my academic background, but also professionally and my professional experiences. And the realm that I work in actually very professionally and the realm that I inhabit academically right now are actually kind of on paper. You might be left with your head, scratching your head as to what the connection is. And I think that the day that I realized that the e-portfolio was the way that I could make that connection for both those professors and those who were engaging with my work academically, and then also those who are engaging with my work professionally. When I finally realized that the e-portfolio could be that bridge for everyone, I think that that's really when I was just, it lit a fire under me and really got me gung-ho about it.
Thanks. Christina, do you want to take the next question?
Sure. So they're really great questions in the chat, and one kind of the one that David asked goes a little bit into the direction also of what we had prepared. And so again, whoever feels comfortable answering can take it. You've been talking about portfolios that you've created for assessment and then also for continuing on from there. So who were your audiences and how much did that audience or the audiences for whom you created the portfolio influence your decision about including certain reflections, media, or topics? And that kind of also in a way of, did you embrace the portfolio from the start, or was it initially more forced upon you and you only saw some benefits afterwards? Who wants to go first?
I can answer that one too.
Yeah, thanks, Naomi.
So when I first started, like I said, it was an assignment. So I treated it as an assignment. I wasn't super excited about doing it. And I'm pretty sure I might have even waited until the last minute to get it all put together. But it was a lot of work getting all that information together. So once that was done, I was really proud of it. And I realized I put all this work into this, and it's pretty much, displaying who I am as a person on here. I want to keep up with this and keep working on it because I don't want all that work to have been in vain. So it did start as just an assignment, but now I'm very much more passionate about it. And for the second part of the question, as I go into the future, there are things in my portfolio that might not be as relevant. So for instance, right now I have a whole page that has my courses on there. So every class that I've ever taken, I have it listed in my portfolio. But as I graduate and go on in my career and I move farther away from my undergraduate studies, that might not be as relevant anymore. So that's something that I could take off. But for right now, that's something that I feel like is important for people to realize. What sorts of courses I'm taking and what I'm learning in class and what I'll be able to apply. But yeah, as I go on, the portfolio will have to evolve. I'm not sure exactly how yet, but I do want to keep up with it later on because it is so valuable as I've learned in the past.
Thank you, Naomi. And they received really nice transition from that assessment portfolio into something that can also be used for internships or for other purposes beyond the university.
So okay, I can weigh. Yeah, I don't mind weighing in a little bit. So I initially used my portfolio for my dissertation proposal defense. So for those of you, just a little bit of background, I had to offer up to my dissertation committee what my dissertation proposal would be. I had completed kind of an introduction and then kind of a sample, an article 1 of my 3 articles of my dissertation, and had to present that to my committee to be considered ABD, all but dissertation, to be considered a candidate for the doctorate. I had my doctoral defense, and I used my ePortfolio as kind of a scaffold for my presentation to my dissertation committee. So that was a very practical way that my portfolio was used. Since the defense, I have also used it in professional, LinkedIn profiles to send to other people interested in some of the work that I'm already doing. I've been able to send that as kind of the little snippet to give them a great overarching view of what my work is and where it is in the process. And then for the future, I will be using that as well to help. I'll be kind of editing it for the defense, since the dissertation's not fully complete. Articles 2 and Article 3, I posted just the outline of each of those articles. So whenever I transition into the fully finished dissertation, Articles 2 and 3 will be replaced with the full articles instead of just the outlines. And then for my conclusions, I'm actually writing a traditional conclusion, but creating a toolkit. And so I will use my ePortfolio as the home for this practical toolkit that I am giving people to help kind of arm them to take my research and operationalize it. And so my portfolio will then become this place to help have a home for some of the practical tools that I'm helping arm practitioners as well.
Anyone else want to tackle that one?
It was interesting what Mandy said there, just about introducing your LinkedIn profile on it and using it as a sharing tool. I found along my journey with ePortfolio, it really helped my professional development, because as a reflection tool, reflecting back over, various CPD courses and workshops, it actually can highlight sometimes a gap in your skill set and areas that you need to work on. And I don't know if personally I would have been able to identify those areas if I hadn't had gone through the e-learning process and building the ePortfolio. I also use the ePortfolio as a collaboration tool, and to remind students as well that, it's okay to reach out and ask for help. You don't need to be experts in everything. Personally, myself, I wasn't used to using Loop Reflect when I first started on the ePortfolio route, and I was constantly on to the Learning and Development Department in DCU asking for a bit of support and a bit of help and a bit of guidance, and the help is there. And I feel as well that, using the ePortfolio as a collaboration tool as well, and to tap into, experts in certain fields or certain areas. I particularly wanted to help the first year students that I was supporting for their personal development and professional practice. And through the ePortfolio process, it really reminded me that, there are experts out there in different areas, and that you can tap into their funds and knowledge and approach them and ask them to do, little bespoke videos with you or YouTube things. So I think that ePortfolio development is actually an innovative tool for learning as well, and future learning journeys too.
Thanks, Sam. Just leaving space. We did a great exercise with breath earlier today with Tracy Pennylight, so I am trying to practice that. So some of you began answering this, and I just wanted to see if anybody wanted to tack on any additional statements. Do you all plan to continue developing and updating your portfolio after graduation? And if so, how? And I know, Mandy, you answered this pretty thoroughly, and Naomi, you started to touch on it, but I just didn't know if anybody wanted to add any details about your plans for anything after you graduate.
I am currently in the process of refining my portfolio, so I'm still updating it as I speak. I originally never had just one concrete sort of portfolio. Mine just sort of came along as I did new assessments and new articles and such. So it is something that I am still updating, and something that as I do leave university, I will be updating, because I feel like, especially in my field, it has to be quite recent, and it has to show that I am still actively going out and writing stories and finding articles. So yes, it will be something that will continue to be in use throughout my professional life, hopefully, and throughout after I finish university.
Thanks, Brianna.
I want to quickly acknowledge one barrier that I'm kind of forecasting that I may run into. And that is if I'm using an institutional based portfolio program that's tied to my institutional account after graduation, what does my access still look like to that? So that's one barrier that that may exist if we're thinking and considering the future, perpetuity for ePortfolios and keeping them updated after graduation, is if there is any system limitations to that. So I know that's something that I am considering for myself. And, if we're considering as academic professionals what that might look like for students, that would be something to certainly consider.
Thank you for raising that, Mandy. Samantha, you look like you have something you want to add.
Yeah, Kevin, I just feel that ePortfolios, it's a life learning tool, really, and a great way of collecting evidence. I mean, I recently just went through the fellowship process, and it was great to have that one-stop shop bank of information of my learning journey along the way, all in the one spot. And particularly when you can put reflections in, and it's a very personable learning experience. So for anybody who's considering going down the fellowship route, I really feel that the ePortfolio, it really supports that journey really, really well. Certainly for compiling evidence as well. It's a great learning tool.
Great.
And I can kind of add what Samantha touched on. It's a great way to be able to reflect on what you've learned in the past. So I can go back through and see classes I've taken or places that I work that I might have even forgotten about. And, you know, over time, the farther away you get from an experience, the more you forget about it. So when you look back at your portfolio and you have that reflection there, you can remember what you were going through in that time and what you really took away from it. Because 10 years from now, I'm not going to remember what I learned in my internship this summer, even though that might still be valuable experience for me to be able to reference.
That's a really good point. And for people familiar with the concept of mimesis, it's the act of remembering how we feel about things changes over time. And so that statement you just made, Naomi, is very powerful, that the way we feel about things that we completed in 10 years will be completely different, but we'll also maybe be able to see the connections between those different activities and experiences and how they contribute to who we are as a person. Christina, I think you are up to ask our next question.
Sure. Looking at the time, we still have 9 minutes, so I think we can probably get another couple of questions in. And so my question to you is then, what was most useful to you from the portfolio creation experience?
For me, it was probably learning how to curate my work. Originally, since I was using it as sort of just a tool to submit assessments, I wasn't exactly curating what I was putting on the portfolio. I was just kind of putting anything on it because I was submitting through it. But as I sort of pivoted to using it as more of a portfolio and more of a professional tool, then I had to learn to curate, to then read my feedback and be like, okay, maybe this isn't the one I should show. Maybe this one is. Even if I didn't love this one this much, it seemed as if it was more well received. And so placing that. So yeah, learning how to curate it and learning to just figure out what best represents my professional interests.
And that also makes the ePortfolio and not just an archive of all the things that you have done, but really pointing to the things that are important for you in a particular context. Does anybody else want to take the question?
I'll say quickly because I know we're short on time. I think that it really helped me sort of find my identity, because when I was a freshman and a sophomore, I was very confused in college. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't exactly understand what I was studying or where I wanted to work. But as I started compiling my portfolio and recognizing the different types of volunteering opportunities I took on, I noticed, oh, I love working with kids. I love working with engineering and STEM education for minorities. I love working in the environment. And just being able to step back and kind of have almost an outside view of myself, it helped me recognize the identity that I had as a student, as a person, and as a potential employee somewhere, so that I know what type of realm I want to end up working in and living in.
Wonderful, Naomi. And so kind of in a way that flows into another question that came from the audience. Carly wants to know kind of if you were standing in front of your writing center advisor or were asked to give feedback to your department, what piece of advice would you give them for putting together your portfolio? And what piece of advice do you wish an instructor, advisor, or mentor had given you at the very start of your portfolio journey?
Go ahead, Christina. Would anybody else? Personally, for me, I feel that it would have been very useful to know how valuable it is to hold on to evidence of any journal articles that you've written or blogs or citations of your work that have been quoted in other publications. I think that to know that the ePortfolio grows with you and that you can update it at any time, but don't leave it too long to update it because you might forget the experience, and to reflect on it in a timely way. So after you've done that course or that piece of CPD, you know, just do a bit of free writing afterwards. So as the reflection is valid because it's done in a timely way. I feel the value in sharing your e-portfolio and asking someone that you may perceive as a mentor for feedback from your e-portfolio as well, because if you're looking at the one piece of work yourself, quite often you only ever see the same things. Whereas when you share it with somebody else, they see it from a different perspective. So sharing it with colleagues, sharing it with a mentor, and I suppose that element of collaboration as well, and not being afraid to step outside your comfort zone and to ask for help or to ask an expert in a particular area as well.
Similar to what Samantha said, I would say to just start, because it's very easy to procrastinate and wait too long. But then when you wait longer, there's more stuff you have to remember, and that's going to be hard to kind of get all that together. And also, don't be afraid to be vulnerable in your portfolio, because I mentioned before, I was nervous about talking about my cancer, my personal identity on there, but you never know who it's going to reach or who it's going to have a positive impact on when you are vulnerable on a platform like this.
I would say one of the pieces of advice or maybe perspective that may have been enlightening through the process for me was that the e-portfolio, I may have gained some value in thinking about the e-portfolio as a way to help structure and scaffold my thoughts, especially as I was writing. I found that as I was putting together my portfolio in and of itself, that it was a really great way to break through some writing difficulties, or if I was having trouble kind of organizing a particular argument or thought. I found that the process of having to organize it for the portfolio actually helped clarify my writing. And so I think that maybe I thought of creating my portfolio as something separate and distinct from the writing process. Maybe the advice about kind of doing that concurrently would have been something that would have been helpful for the writing in and of itself as an extra tool to help me clarify and organize my writing, and to see the processes as intertwined rather than separate. And that may have just been me having that impression too, but that would have been valuable insight along the way.
I think the advice that I received was to try and make it sort of something that you enjoy doing, to find the fun in it. Originally, I didn't like adding to it. I thought it was a bit tedious. I thought, oh, I've already made my assessments. Why should I add to it? But then learning like, oh, I can make interesting graphics. I can create themes. I can add, I don't know, pictures or video essays or podcasts that help make out my point, that help spread sort of what I'm passionate about and what I'm interested in. That made it a much more enjoyable process. So try and find the fun in it. That's what I'd say.
Well, and I think we can possibly do a quick lightning round last question. We have a couple minutes left, and building on what you just said, Brianna, Samantha Blevins asked, do any of you have advice on how we can reach students who don't quite understand the value of e-portfolios yet? And so, Brianna, you started to touch on that with the advice that you got. And I'm wondering if any of you have advice for instructors on how to help other students see the value of e-portfolios, both during their studies, after their studies, or at any point in between. And we'll do lightning round, so just whatever's on the top of your head.
I would say just try and show that it's different from your normal assessment, that you can be more creative and show more of yourself. So that's what I would sort of promote.
I would say showing them an example, because I do work a little bit with kids, probably not as much as a teacher, but just showing them an example of what an e-portfolio is and talking to them about it and giving them access to someone who does use it so they can understand the value of it.
Great suggestion.
I agree with Naomi. As a lecturer or tutor myself, the most important thing that you can do is share something of yourself to form that reciprocal, respectful relationship with your students. And I can personally tell you that it does work when you share, because when you share parts of yourself, people want to share as well. But I do feel as well that with the ePortfolio, it's a fantastic opportunity to share your core values. So I would ask students to think, what are their particular core values that they want to share? What's important to them?
And I would say, think about the practicality, emphasize the practicality of being able to have your portfolio serve as that important bridge to your professional identity. I would say, think about the accessibility of bringing your work and out of the classroom and creating some transformation. And then I would also say, think about it through the equity lens of how a portfolio can create opportunities to have voices who may have been marginalized otherwise. The portfolio gives a lot of equal ground and equal footing, both for the voices that are being portrayed and also the voices that may hear and partake in the portfolio.
Well, I think I can speak for everyone and just start with a big thank you to our panelists. You've answered not only the prepared questions, but many of those from those in the audience. And the comments, if you haven't been following the chat, include, why don't we have student panels at every conference that we have? So you all did just such great work and are continuing to do great work. So thank you for shining a light on the student experience and your own experiences. We are going to just jump right into the next session. So I'd love it if folks, as we stop the recording and start it again for the next thing, could just please thank our student panel for all their hard work and also their honesty, transparency, and the word that came up earlier, vulnerability, to share yourselves. And we truly appreciate that.
Yeah, so a big thank you from my side. And I had already heard some of those stories through the interviews. So it's been awesome to hear more of you also in regards to a lot of other questions that have come up.